Be honest, as a runner, how much money have you wasted on the unnecessary? Because there's so much out there that claims to do this or that for your running, but does it? This week I'm going to take you through some of the most topical products at the moment, and we'll look at the science where possible to see if there's any real benefit for us. Most of this stuff we bought ourselves to test, and a little bit was sent to us, but none of it with the agreement that we have to say positive things. Honesty and integrity is more important to us. And if you're not subscribed, then consider joining the journey so that we can help you even more.
Okay, let's start here. Over the last year or so, you've probably become more aware of the word ketones and how it might be able to benefit your running. Well, let me just, before I tell you whether it does or not, tell you what ketones are. You probably know that when we run, we break down carbohydrates to use them as energy in the form of glucose. Well, what you might not know is fat is also broken down as a source of energy, especially at low intensity, and it's broken down in one part in the form of ketones. So ketones is to fat like glucose is to carbohydrates, in a way, in the simplest of ways. So the theory would then go, if you take ketones before your race or run, then you should be giving yourself a little boost of energies that are derived from fats. And by the way, ketones are one of the primary sources of fuel for the brain, so they're also supposed to promote kind of clear-headedness and clarity when you're running. So I wanted to see if ketones work, and it just so happened I had some in my fridge. So this morning before this run, I went to the fridge, I took some ketones, I drank them. By the way, they taste, they call it an acquired taste. I call it one of the hardest things I've ever had to drink in my life. So here's the thing now, I'm 17 kilometers into my run. Can I or have I felt the ketones at any part of the run? It's impossible to know. I just don't know. And that's kind of where the science is at as well. And the latest paper I could find shows that there's no real correlation between taking ketones and improved performance or even improved clarity. So let's just say at this stage, I wouldn't rule out that ketones are effective, but right now the evidence is not conclusive, and that's good enough for me to say, do I need ketones in my life? No.
Something I'd always been fascinated about was what was happening on the inside when I was exercising, particularly when it came to my energy levels. So I researched and then I bought a blood glucose monitor, similar to those that some of my diabetic friends wear. It gave me blood glucose readings every 3 minutes for a couple of months, and I raced with it, trained with it, wore it every day. And for me, I did learn a few interesting things, like how my body responds to gels and how often is the ideal time frame to use those gels. I could actually see the data. I could see what different meals at different times of the day did for me, which foods seemed best to fuel me. Let's be honest, probably all stuff I could figure out without the monitor, but it was nice to have the data to back it up. The thing is, it was a bit of a faff. It didn't deal well in the heat and humidity over here, and unless you're super geeky about this stuff, there's no real need. And to be honest with you, I'd worry that if you in any way had any eating sensitivities or issues, this is just going to make it worse. So was it interesting? Yeah, absolutely. Should you approach it with caution? Also, yes.
Over the last year, you might have seen top-level runners like Eliud Kipchoge himself, Sifan Hassan, wear this headband that looks like it is straight out of Star Trek. Well, it's called the Omus Headband, and what it is supposed to do is keep you cool at the forehead whilst you're running. But is there scientific evidence to back this claim up? And on this run, I've sent Mary out to wear it. So the way the Omus is meant to work is that you cool the blocks in water before you put it on your head, and then whilst you're running, those blocks use the wind to cool down your forehead, making you think and feel like it's cooler than it is, and your rating of perceived exertion is lower, so you can, in theory, push harder. But here's the thing, once again, in the limited studies that they've done on this, they can't find a correlation over short distance speed or long distance easy that says by wearing this and cooling down your forehead that you're actually going to feel that it's easier or even actually improve your performance. And you know how they know this? They did a bunch of other body temperature readings, including rectal temperature. Hey, look who I found. It's Mary. How's the headband working, Mare?
Yeah, good. Yeah, feeling very cool up here, which mentally is nice because it's a hot morning, my body's sweating, but I feel like I'm keeping cool.
Cool brain. Okay, I'll see you later. I'm taking off.
Bye.
Bye. So cooler forehead, yes. Improved performance, no conclusive studies yet. I'll tell you what is interesting and does have conclusive evidence though, and I actually remember this from uni 20 odd years ago, is if you cool the area around the neck where the carotid artery is, that's the artery that brings blood to the brain. If you cool that blood and that blood travels to the brain's thermoregulation center, the brain thinks it's cooler than it is, reducing the thermal, or believing the thermal load is less, which means you can exercise harder and for longer. So that does have conclusive evidence. The only problem is if you are in extreme heat and then you trick your brain into thinking the thermal load is lower, you could quite easily push yourself into a very dangerous area. But maybe that's the next step for Omus. Work on the temperature of the blood at the carotid artery.
Oh.
Hi.
How was the Omus?
Nice.
Be honest.
I felt quite elite. Yeah, I think the last 6K, I sort of like forgot I was feeling anything.
Yeah.
But definitely for the first section, my head felt cool, and that was good for my mind because it was quite a hard run today.
Okay.
So I think that helped.
Sometimes you don't need science, sometimes you just need a placebo and what you think is doing you good.
And more fuel.
More fuel. How about CBD? You might have heard this word and not known what it is, but CBD is cannabidiol, which is one of the active ingredients and one of the safe ingredients in cannabis. And companies like Puresport and many others are now using it in muscle balms and lotions because they believe that it will both reduce inflammation and reduce pain. But is that actually true? So I did a little bit of digging around. I looked at some of the latest research out there on whether this cannabidiol, or at least muscle balms, or even ingested CBD can reduce inflammation, it can reduce pain. And from what I can see is, as much as the smell is nice because they put other things in there that make it relaxing and soothing, there doesn't seem to be a ton of evidence. In fact, I couldn't really find any that proves that these balms and joint lotions do in any way reduce muscle inflammation or even reduce pain. So I guess at the very least what I'm saying is that these balms and muscle rubs are not a negative, and you have an applicator here, and so I guess that it's kind of a self-massage. But as far as the evidence goes, that's about as far as I can say at this point. Would we invest time and money in buying these muscle balms and lotions? Probably not. We're always willing to give everything a go one time.
And what about a Coros Footpod, or any Footpod? So I'm currently wearing on my shoe. Now that is supposed to give enhanced GPS. It's supposed to enable you to get a GPS, or the equivalent of, whilst indoors. So have you ever been on a treadmill or running indoors and you lose that GPS signal, or even London or Chicago Marathon where you kind of go through Canary Wharf or areas where the GPS drops out? This Footpod is meant to counteract that. It's meant to just keep your data pure, real time, and up to date on the watch. What it isn't is a power meter, so it doesn't give you power. It does give you a kind of grade adjusted pace, which really is just, it tries to adjust your effort if you're going up or downhill to give you a relative pace. But the main benefit of it, I guess, is that it works indoors. Once you've worn it enough and it's kind of worked out what a kilometre or a mile is, you can then wear it indoors. So where I see it working for me is actually in 2 weeks' time, Mary and I are racing a High Rocks, and we're running 8 lots of 1 kilometre reps in a warehouse that there's no way my normal GPS on a Coros or a Garmin would pick up. Now this will. So I'll be able to know my pace when I'm running, which I think is going to be really important, at least in a High Rocks race. The downside to this is it only links to the Coros. It doesn't link to my Garmin. So I'm wearing 2 watches today, but I feel like it has its place. It's not cheap, but will I use it for High Rocks? Will it hopefully benefit me to get a better overall time if I know exactly my paces I'm running? Yeah. So I think it's worth it.
Okay, what about these things? Ice baths, because for the longest time ice baths were thought to be a really good recovery tool, and actually that thought is still quite prevalent now, especially you see a lot of elite athletes jumping into an ice bath. But the science is starting to say different, and you might be wondering why I'm actually getting in. Oh my goodness. Oh. Okay. Here's the thing they used to think about ice baths. That it reduces the swelling and inflammation, so it speeds up that process of recovery. But what they've actually found is inflammation is what's needed to recover. So ice baths nowadays, the science is saying, actually inhibits muscle growth, inhibits the process of being better and improving. And to be honest with you, the reason that I'm even in this ice bath is just to make the point that really ice baths aren't actually useful in recovery and growing muscle. Sometimes I do wonder why I do this to myself. Alright, here's where ice baths could be of benefit. If you don't do them after a long run, if you don't do them after a heavy strength session, maybe you do them before a session. I'm many hours removed right now from my long run, so it should be alright. But I think the point is, scientifically, we're now finding out that these aren't the greatest for you if you want to keep growing and being better as a runner. So probably worth me actually getting out, I'd have said. Still get that little endorphin hit. Not necessarily a piece of technology per se, but you might have seen this cropping up every now and then. London Marathon, there was a world record broken in these. Carbon plated sandals. Now, hear me out on these ones. Are they niche? Yes, absolutely. But do people run in sandals? Yeah, actually quite a lot over here in Southeast Asia. So I'm certainly not starting by saying waste of time chucking them out. Hear me out. I first saw these when Barnabas Kiplimo steamed past me when I was running a half marathon and he was winning a marathon in 2:18. Which got me thinking, I'd quite like to try them. So I reached out to the owner of the brand Ving, Wei, his name is, and we met up. He sent me a pair and I got to try them and I got to race a 10k in them. Now, I don't have to say nice things about any of the products in this video, but I will if I think that it is worth it. And with these sandals, although I can't see myself running a marathon in them, I definitely can see myself running races and running in training in these sandals because they do feel a lot more free. They are super, super light, lighter than the lightest super shoe. And yes, they're niche, but I just generally quite like the feel of them. They certainly felt as fast as my super shoes when I was racing that 10k in them. There's a carbon plate along the bottom, and we know that there is good evidence for super shoes improving your performance, carbon plates, and generally, you know, they're a bit of fun. So I enjoyed wearing them, I enjoy wearing them, I'll probably continue to enjoy wearing them. And they're starting to be recognised globally as well. Hey, take a look at that. You see that? That is what we call a smart ring. And this one is an ultra human ring, but you have Aura rings you've probably heard of, you've got Whoop bands, you've got many ways, even watches to track your sleep nowadays. And the idea behind a smart watch or a smart ring is that it will give you your sleep data, it will give you your body temperature data, it might be able to tell you if you're about to get ill, it'll certainly tell you if your quality of sleep is low or high, but wait, will it actually? Because here's the thing, actually, I'm a pretty light sleeper and I turn a lot at night, like a lot of movement, and that's what this ring picks up on. So since I've had the ring for about a year, I've never been given a good sleep score, even though I know many times I've slept well, just because I move a lot in the night. Mary is the opposite, like a log, like does not move, scores 100 almost all of the time, and we probably sleep in terms of, for us, similarly, and we recover similarly. So is the technology in this good? Yeah, it is really good. It's really interesting. It can show you your sleep, it can show you your body temperature, it can show you a lot of different metrics. Does it actually help me or my training? No. And actually, at the moment, if anything, it's quite demotivating because all I see is every night that I sleep poorly in comparison to Mary. So can I see a place for a smart ring within my training? Not really, no, don't think it really is going to help, but I do like it and I like the colour, so I'm glad I've got it. But is it particularly helpful for me in my running? No. There's a pattern here. Most of the items we've talked about today, although not detrimental to performance, don't have the science to back up the claims that they're going to aid your performance in some way. Maybe that will come with further studies, but also maybe not. Ultimately, sometimes even a placebo could be enough. If you feel like it's helping you, it might just be. But if you want to follow the science, then you can do a lot worse than these 5 things that are going to guarantee to improve your performance. Long-term consistency, caffeine when done correctly, strength training, carb loads, and good in-race fueling strategy. And if you crave more guidance, our membership group and our marathon group class 4 is open now and growing quickly, so I'll put a link in the description. But if that's not your bag, just subscribe because it's free and we'll always continue to help as many people as we can to be the best runners they can be. And now we've dealt with running tech, why don't we deal with running diet and watch this video here because I think it could really help you, and we'll see you next week.